Hello, hello. Welcome to Boys on Film. My name is Phil Marriott. I am joined once again by Matt over in Oregon in the US and, oh look, he's here, Sean in London in the UK, which is where I am. So we're talking about Bros. So this is Billy Eichner. This is a film made by him. I mean, it's got his stamp all over it, but it's directed by Nicholas Stoller, written by Billy Eichner and Nicholas Stoller. A very queer romantic comedy. We've seen a few of those, but this is proper full-on. I mean, the cast, it's a very queer cast too, genuinely queer. You know, it's not just straight actors taking on the queer characters. So do you want to set the scene, Sean? Tell us what it's about.
It's about some gays. I will go into some further detail for you.
Fabulous.
It follows the stuff. Billy Eichner's character, who's called Bobby, he is in the process of trying to launch the first national LGBTQ plus museum, surrounded by some gorgeous people like T.S. Madison and all sorts. He's unlucky in love. He's like a 40-something bloke. He's out there trying to find his special person. And there's loads of lol things about him being on apps and being in clubs and all that kind of good stuff, and we'll get to that. He randomly meets Luke Macfarlane, who's a babe, in a club, and it follows really their story about how they get to know each other.
So Bobby is kind of like the nerdy character. He's quite loud and quite... I was going to use the word flamboyant, but I hate that word because it's always used to describe gay people. Luke Macfarlane's character is like the clubber, the muscle Mary. Again, another term that winds me up. But yeah, so it's got a mix of characters from the queer scene. I guess what we're used to, people that we know ourselves, or people that we are ourselves. But can I just get one thing off my chest first of all? Why is it that podcast creators so often are seen on TV or in movies as having live phone-ins? When did that become a thing? It just doesn't happen. Does it happen? Sean, you could tell us.
I'm actually a podcaster.
Unflocked. Yeah, you are a podcaster. So it never happens, does it?
I think, and just like that is to blame for it. I think that podcast phoning that Sarah Jessica Parker does with Shay somehow bastardized a genre of media. Like, who the dials into a podcast? Exactly. It's hard enough recording a podcast as it is without people dialing in.
It's like these people just don't know how podcasts work. They've never been with a podcast creator.
It's not a radio. No. It's not a live radio station, loves.
But anyway, minor gripe aside, I went into this film for the first 20 minutes thinking this is going to be a film that I'm going to hate, because it wound me up and it really not irritated me. I was entertained by it, but I just found it like it was going to be cliches all the way through. But I think eventually it did win me over.
My main gripe with it is it's a big romantic comedy, right? Do not make a romantic comedy 2+ hours long. It just doesn't work. Yeah, it was over 2 hours long, and I was just like many times staring at my watch. There was a scene where he sung a song, like a full 3.5-minute song. Yeah. Do we need the full song? I think this movie is also a taste test of whether you like Billy Eichner, because he's in every single scene of the movie, I think.
See, I loved Billy on the Street. I thought it was hilarious, always hilarious. I mean, it never let me down each episode. But I think this was kind of tame compared to that. But I don't know whether that's because they deliberately made it a bit fluffier because it was a romantic comedy, and also because it kind of, he wanted bombs on seats in the cinema. It had to please everybody. It had to please not just the queer community, but also the straight audiences as well. And I know that he was kind of disappointed that, kind of semi-blaming the straight audiences for not going to see it at the cinema, because it bombed, didn't it, in the States?
It's like a small indie gay film that got a giant Hollywood boost, but it's still going to be the same audience. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. There's no mega stars in the film. He's the biggest name probably in the film.
So it cost $22 million to make. It made 14, so it has lost money, but I don't know what it was like.
It's interesting it costs that much because it doesn't really seem like a giant big production number. It's kind of a pretty simple.
It went on Deborah Messing.
The thing with him, with Billy Eichner, I do like Billy on the Street too, but he's one of those situations for me where he's a funny stand-up comedian, but he's not funny as a scripted actor, I don't think. If they're not a super great comic actor with a ton of experience, they feel really stiff reading lines, and he kind of has that persona. Whereas when he's off the cuff, he's hilarious. You know, he's really great, but I think that's a hindrance.
I mentioned we were going to be reviewing this, and somebody tweeted at me, why is he so angry and aggressive all the time?
I was on that tweet thread. And I had an existential moment with it. I was like, really good point. So I was just minding my own business, cooking dinner while that film was on, and my husband was on the sofa watching it. So I was kind of I wasn't watching the film per se, but I was listening to it.
Hang on a minute. Has this ever happened before? Did this happen with, Cruella? Were you making dinner? No, you didn't see that film,
I haven't finished the story, thank you.
Sorry. Carry on.
So I was just cooking dinner, and I could hear it, and I was kind of glancing at it, and I was like, oh, it's like kind of like loads of gags and loads of jokes, and it's kind of like on the nose about like primarily white gay culture, not necessarily queer culture. And then I think it fell into some kind of traditional linear storyline, which is basically any love story. And I think this is why it flopped, because basically it fell into those two falling in love, falling out, falling back into love. We've seen that story 1 million times, 1 million times. So the fact that it's two white cis gay men, I think is just a bit like meh. Like that's what I think the problem with it is like you're telling a story that most people are like, okay, I think I know this story arc. It just happens to be two men.
So true. Having said that, though, I did quite like the references to Hallmark and the piss take of Hallmark, because obviously Luke Macfarlane is a big actor in Hallmark movies. So that was kind of like a bit of an in-joke, but I thought that was quite tongue-in-cheek.
I did laugh at Holly Polly Christmas.
Yeah, exactly.
I did think that was kind of a nice pun. That's how I felt about it. I think you're right, Matt. I don't think he's set up or has the chops to pull off that kind of comedic lead protagonist in something like this, in this rom-com. Oh, look, they're talking about monogamy. And I don't know whether they thought that was like sensationalized in a way, but, most people out there watching this are going to be like, yeah, sure, that's gay life. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know whether it was as shocking as people believed it to be, or like it was so on the nose. I just thought it was a bit like, okay, yeah, it's just like what the people talk in the pub.
Back to the comedy, though. I mean, I did lol quite a few times, more than 5 times, which I think is an indication that either I'm drunk or that it was genuinely quite funny. I wasn't drunk.
It was a 2.5 hour movie, so if you extrapolate that number, it's once every 22 minutes, so I don't know.
Love some math. Love the maths. I will say, Matt, and I have said this before, and I'm like a broken record, and this will be on my tombstone. It could have been 20 minutes shorter.
That old chestnut.
It could have been an hour shorter.
I was weirdly charmed by it. Luke Macfarlane, I think, will charm anybody anyway. Billy Eichner, I was kind of charmed by his character because he was going through some tough times during this 2 hours, whatever it was. And I kind of wanted him to win throughout, even though he was a bit spiky.
You're just two of many millions of British gay men. What do you feel as a Brit watching someone like Billy Eichner as an American? Is he like the most obnoxious example of American?
In my mind, he fits the mold of a gay white American, I'm just going to leave that there.
You're not going to say any more.
Well, I don't want to be rude. So Matt, in London, we have all of these like zones, right? And the gays live all over these zones, right? And depending on what zone you live in, you'll get judged. There's a load of gays that live in a neighbourhood called Clapham that are called the Clapham gays.
I work there.
Billy and Luke Macfarlane would live there. So they're a certain kind of polished gay who are highly heteronormative and, slightly neurotic, but have good jobs, and, the struggle is not so real. And the two of them would be there. No disrespect to Clapham or to the Clapham gay scene, just to the individuals.
I'll tell you what this film reminded me of. Have you seen Fire Island? That movie, Fire Island?
They weren't both amazing. They weren't both 100% terrible. They're just kind of like in the middle.
Do you think this film needed a big star? Like Jennifer Coolidge?
No, I think this film needed a plot. I think it needed like something what gave it a bit of pizzazz, because it really fell into quite a traditional storyline, regardless of the protagonist. The story arc was just, that's probably why it felt so long for you, Matt.
Predictable.
Because you're following what is a quite traditional story arc. At 2 hours, you're like, okay, where's the sad bit where they break up? Oh, it's here.
That clubbing scene was weird. I don't know if you noticed this. I mean, this is me being very finicky and picking it a little bit.
Phil, remember, you live on the club scene. You are
exactly. It's like picking a scab. It's like picking a scab. The lighting was so weird. It was like a grey filter. You know when he sees Luke Macfarlane's character downstairs dancing away on the dance floor, and he's up on the balcony talking to his friend, and they're looking over, and he's like saying, "Oh, that guy's 60. I went to bed with him. He's like so ripped." Do you remember that scene? Everything had this grey filter on it, but when the lights hit them, the club lights, it went colour. It was like a Wizard of Oz moment. It was so bizarre.
I don't go to clubs like that. I don't go to clubs very often anyway, but I don't go to like shirtless white party, like muscle dude dance floors. I go to dance floors that have, everyone has their clothes on, and they look a lot more diverse than that. They can still all be gay men, but they're not all like ripped dudes. That seems like a trope in gay movies where it's like, there's a club scene, so everyone's shirtless, everyone's ripped with like...
Exactly, Matt. This was the problem. This is the problem with it.
That's why I was so wound up the first 20 minutes.
They're packaging this kind of idea of white gay to a wider audience and going, yeah, you're right. Every cliche that you thought about, like men with tops off in harnesses dancing to techno, they just packaged it and sent it back. And the reality is that ain't the case. So a lot of the gays are going to go, yeah, but that's not the case. And a lot of straight people are going to go, yeah, but I know a load of people that isn't the case. So I just don't get why they did it. To your point, they could have been like in a great indie club, or it could have been something different.
I don't want to be a fun sponge, but the scene where they're all working together around the table, and you've got the bisexual guy, you've got the trans character, you've got the lesbian. To me, that felt shoehorned just for the diversity tick. I just wanted it to feel a bit more genuine. It felt a bit like, I don't know, like those characters were the joke. And like I say, I don't want to be the fun sponge because I don't want to take it too seriously, because at the end of the day it is a romantic comedy. But I just felt that was a bit disingenuous.
I think you're right, but also that is a cliche in itself. That whole setup, that whole like the mise en scène of that is a setup, because it's also playing into this like gag of like, oh look, and there's the intersex person. Oh look, and there's that. It plays into something. And if I think about something like Looking, I liked Looking because in some ways it was a bit more raw around the edges. It was a bit more real. Sure, it still follows, but it felt a bit more like it was primarily gay men living their lives without it being through this really weird filter that seems to get pushed out. It feels slightly out of time. I think it doesn't fit right. It feels a bit like Stanford in Sex and the City, and it feels a bit like this queer character, like BFF queer character that has moved on and evolved. So it's strange that they put the pin in the map and said, we're going to do this. Because I just think generally people are far more sophisticated and nuanced than that.
I agree with that, Sean. It felt like a very well-intentioned straight screenwriters, even though I know it's not a straight screenwriter, but it felt like that setup of a well-intentioned liberal straight screenwriter is trying to make all the gays in one room at the same time kind of set up, and it doesn't feel natural, it feels forced. If I'm being generous, 3 stars. If I'm not being generous, 2 stars. Do you know what I mean? Like, there are moments where I'm like, oh, this is a 3. And then there'll be a half an hour stretch where I'm like, this is a 2. And then I'll be like, oh, this is a 3. Oh, this is a 2.
I think that's fair. Sean?
It's a 2. It might actually be a 1. But I think, do you know what? I've still got some Christmas cheer left. So,
and she's not drinking.
And I'm not drinking, so it's really quite awful for everyone else. So 2.
Okay. Well, I think
it might have been a 3 if Megan showed up at the end and just like
Did the
I'll tell you
leveled
what would
the
make it a
place.
3, Matt.
Backflips.
I'll tell you what would make it a 3. If we lost an hour of the film,
Yeah.
if we changed both of the main characters, and it had a different plot.
That's fair as well. Well, I'm going to go for a 3 because for all its flaws, and I completely agree with both of you on its flaws, and I did think it was going to be a film that was going to be a 2 for me in the first 20 minutes. It turned out that it did redeem itself. So, yeah, I'm going to go for a 3 because I was entertained by it and I was weirdly charmed by it in a kind of not real way. It was like a Hallmark movie, but with its tongue in its cheek a little bit more, knowing that it was meant to be a romantic comedy.
I
Three.
don't want to be a pedant, Phil. You can't agree with me and Matt if you give it a higher score.
I think I liked it more maybe than both of you.
Just want to call it out. You can't be like, I agree with you and I'm going to score it higher. Matt and I said it was rubbish. You said it was less rubbish.
3. I mean, that's not a 5-star.
No.
Yeah, it's not a 5-star
it's okay.
rating.
What's that on average? So 3, 5, 7 out of
Don't go there.
15?
You know what'll happen? I'll start giving it a tiny fraction more of a star.
7 out of 15. It
than
sounds
it
quite
deserves.
good.
Yeah. So Bros is going to be released on DVD and Blu-ray on the 6th of February. Nicely timed to Valentine's Day. Thank you guys as always. It's always a pleasure, never a chore.
Thank you to both of you.
Can we just make sure, Sean, though, that the next film we review, you're not cooking and you're watching properly as you're meant to?
I watched it. Hey, Phil, I watched 12 films this week.
And you didn't get paid a penny. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you on the next one.